Welcome once again to another webinar brought to you by the Alliance in collaboration and in partnership with the American Samoa Legal Aid. We want to thank Executive Director Scott Hess, Mona Oli, Domestic Violence Paralegal, and the entire team at the American Samoa Legal Aid for being able to bring some of this awesome information on stalking while we are still in April. Sexual Assault Awareness and Prevention Month.
Thank you to the Alliance for your support in doing this presentation today. I very much appreciate it. Yeah, so our presentation today is on stalking. Know it, name it, stop it. My name is Mona Uli, and this training was created by the Stalking Prevention Awareness and Resource Center, or SPARC. The national training provider on stalking for OVW. So today we're going to learn about stalking. We've come to find out that many people, especially victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and dating violence, have experienced stalking, but didn't know that it was a crime, what to do about it, where to get assistance and support, and how to help those who experience stalking. So I just wanted to start off with introductions, and if you could type in the chat, introduce yourself and type in the chat using your first and last name initials. Share a positive description about yourself, a positive adjective of yourself. So if you could go ahead and take a minute to do that, take your first and last initials and give a description of yourself using those two letters. And so I'll go ahead and start off, Mona Uli. So mine is M-U. And I'm gonna describe myself, M for mellow. I'm very mellow and easygoing. And the U, I'm going to say understanding. I try and, when I meet people that are kind of rude or kind of, rude, I always try to be understanding by telling myself, well, maybe they're having a rough day, or maybe, things are going on with them. So yeah, that's me, mellow and understanding. Judy, can you share your initials and a description of yourself using J and M?
Okay, so before I share on mine, I wanted to share what some of you have shared in the have put in the chat box. And so we have JC and JC for Jaylene Chung. And so she put down here describing her, using her first and last name initials. She has jolly and charismatic. Jolly and charismatic. Thank you for that, Jaylene. And then we have Wendy Lotulele. So Wendy is wonderful and loving. Wonderful and loving, WL. Thank you, Wendy.
Yay, thank you, Wendy.
Then we have Dr. Carolyn Fisserberg. I like how Carolyn, I like how she put down here all the three initials, something for all three initials. So she has here caring, passionate, and blessed. Caring, passionate, and blessed. Thank you, Dr. Carolyn. I think that was awesome. And then we have Miss Beauty Tuyasosopo. Beauty Tuyasosopo. So Beauty is doing it differently, but this is what Beauty has: caring and humble. Caring and humble is what Beauty Tuyasosopo means. I love that. And we have Derek Halsham, daring and hopeful. That is so Derek. So Derek Halsham is daring and hopeful, or damaged and hungry. Derek. And then we have Faleula Sepa. Ula here has forgiving and serving. Forgiving and serving. Um, Thank you, Ula. So for me, mine are J and M, Judy Matatia. The only thing that it's funny because every time I think of J, I always think of juicy. You know, like the chewing gum, juicy fruit. It's like one of my favorite chewing gums. Juicy fruit, juicy fruit. So juicy and magical. Magical. That's me today. That's
Yay.
for today. It'll change tomorrow. But for today, JM is juicy and magical. And that's everyone that shared, Mona. Thank you.
Yay. Thank you, everyone, for participating. It's very important to think of positive affirmations. Positive affirmations affects our mindset. Our mindsets are important for success, for how our day is going to be, how we're going to respond to things. So it's very important to have focus on positive affirmations. So thank you for sharing these positive descriptions of yourself. Before we get started, I just wanted to give a trauma warning. Today's program, we're going to be talking about stalking and violence in detail with examples and true stories. So please take care of yourself however you need to throughout this presentation. I'm going to play a video. It's a 3-minute video about stalking awareness. Oh, there it is.
So why take the time to learn about stalking? Well, stalking is a really important thing to understand. It is criminal, it is traumatic, and it is dangerous. Stalking is criminal. It is a crime across the United States. That means it's a crime at the federal level, in all 50 states, U.S. territories, tribal lands, and in our military justice system. It might be a misdemeanor or a felony, depending on the jurisdiction and the situation. A lot of people don't realize that stalking is a crime, and so many victims are left wondering, well, what, should I call the police because somebody rang my doorbell or drove by my house? And the answer is that victims can consider reporting to authorities as well as documenting the stalking. Stalking is traumatic. Many stalking victims experience mental health impacts, including depression, anxiety, insomnia, and social dysfunction. Quite a few also lose time from work, many lose their jobs altogether. And a significant number relocate. In fact, 1 in 7 stalking victims move as a result of their victimization. It's important to hear from stalking victims and survivors in their own words. This survivor said, "I have given up all hopes of ever having a safe life. For the rest of my life, I will be looking over my shoulder, expecting to see him there." And finally, stalking is dangerous. Stalking often co-occurs with physical violence, including physical assault, sexual violence, and rape. 1 in 5 stalkers use weapons to threaten or harm their victims. And in 76% of intimate partner femicides, that's murder of a female partner by a male partner, in 76% of completed and 85% of attempted, there was stalking the year prior to that murder or attempted murder. And yet so often, these early signs of danger are ignored as, oh, it's just texting, it's just ringing the doorbell. In fact, one researcher went so far as to say that stalking is homicide in slow motion. So what's the good news? The good news is that we have an opportunity, because stalking is one of the few crimes where early intervention can prevent trauma, violence, and even death. When we recognize those early signs, take them seriously, connect victims to resources, and hold offenders accountable, We can keep our communities safe from this prevalent and terrible crime. That's why it's so critical that you learn about stalking and how to know it, name it, and stop it.
Okay, so I just wanted to share our American Samoa Code annotated law, that we do have a law regarding stalking. And it's in Title 46, and it says that a person commits the crime of stalking if they purposely and knowingly engage in a course of conduct that is directed toward another person, and that conduct causes reasonable fear of harm to the physical health, safety, or property of such person, a member of their immediate, or a third party with whom they are acquainted, or causes harm to the mental or emotional health of such person after the actor was previously clearly informed to cease that conduct, or is likely to cause such person to reasonably fear that his employment, business, or career is threatened, where such conduct consists of appearing, telephoning, or initiating communication or contact at their place of employment or business, and the actor was previously clearly informed to cease that conduct. It says that stalking is a Class B misdemeanor unless the offense was committed where there was a restraining order in place. Then it becomes a Class A misdemeanor. So I just wanted to share that with everyone, that it is in our American Samoa Code annotated law. So the first part of our presentation today is know it. And so I have 3 scenarios to share. So most of you are service providers, or are people that others can call. And so the first scenario is you get a phone call, and it's a woman saying, "There's a cup of coffee in my car." And she's frantic on the phone, and she's hysterical. And what is your first thought as a service provider, someone that answers the phone, when someone's frantic on the phone saying, "There's a cup of coffee in my car"? And so sometimes not knowing what the situation is, we can be annoyed, we can be confused, not knowing what's going on. So the background in this story is that the stalking victim came into her car, and then there was a cup of coffee there. She had left her ex-girlfriend, who was who had threatened to kill her. So she had relocated, and when she came into her car one day, there was a hot cup of coffee in there. So she knew that her this person had found her. And so it changes how we feel about a person being stalked. The second scenario is you get a phone call from a stalking victim saying he's wearing a tuxedo on his Facebook post. He's wearing a tuxedo. And so at first we might think, again, annoying or confused. And the background story is that this person was a victim of stalking who left her ex-husband, and the ex-husband has been posting pictures on Facebook wearing his tuxedo that he was married in at local places that she had recently been. The picture that she's calling about today is a picture of him standing in the restaurant that she was at last night. So that makes it more understanding, and more serious. And then the third one is a light switch. So the third example is you get a call from a man and he's on the phone nervous and he's panicking and he says that all the lights are on in my home. And so just hearing that, we're thinking, and what's going on? What's the problem? And the background story could be that he recently fired someone at work. The person had been sending him emails saying that what happened wasn't fair. He blocked his email, then he started receiving phone calls. And coming into his home and seeing all the lights on, he felt like it was a message to him that this person had broken into his house and knows where he lives. So in all of these three scenarios, the message was that I found you and I know where you are. So context is often what makes stalking scary. In the different scenarios, the coffee cup isn't scary until we know the whole story. In most legal statutes, stalking crimes have a reasonable person standard. The reasonable person standard asks us to consider how any rational person in similar circumstances to the victim might feel. In other words, if a reasonable person would be scared once they understood the context, that could be stalking. So we have another 2-minute video.
Context is critical in stalking cases. It's really everything in stalking cases because a lot of times what seems the scariest to a victim or survivor may seem benign or even nice to an outsider. For example, let's say a victim returns to her desk at work and finds roses. She might become very scared, thinking, well, does the stalker know where I live? How did they find me? Maybe the stalker even said something like, I'll send you roses the day I kill you. Meanwhile, her coworkers are saying, oh, this is so wonderful, and have no idea why the victim's reacting the way that she is. So if you don't understand why a victim's so afraid, you can simply ask them, why was that scary to you? What message did that send to you? Can you tell me more about that? There are multiple studies that show that victim fear is an excellent predictor of victim danger. In other words, if the victim's afraid, there's probably a good reason. Not all victims of stalking express fear the same way. In fact, some may not express fear at all. Some victims may seem more annoyed, sad, angry, or have no apparent reaction whatsoever. Different people react to trauma differently, and that doesn't mean they're not experiencing fear and/or emotional distress. So to summarize, something may be scary to a victim that doesn't seem scary to an outsider. Stalking behaviors often have specific meanings only understood between the victim and the offender. And even if a victim isn't outwardly expressing fear, there may still be fear and still may be stalking. Context is key to understanding stalking and gaining the tools to know it, name it, and stop it.
So what is stalking? Stalking is a pattern of behavior directed at a specific person that would cause a reasonable person to feel fear for the person's safety or the safety of others, or to suffer substantial emotional distress. Stalking is scary, involves multiple incidents, and involves a stalker targeting one individual victim. So these quotes from stalking victims describe some of the fear and distress that they experienced. Stalking is not just frustrating or annoying, it is scary and/or causes severe emotional distress. It's important to hear from victims in their own words how fear is how we differentiate stalking from other crimes like harassment. Harassment generally describes behavior that is irritating, while stalking describes behaviors that cause fear. It can be tricky to identify stalking because, like the video mentioned, some victims may not use language like this. They may seem more annoyed, frustrated, or concerned than scared. One way to help figure out how scary or distressed someone is to take note of what they've changed in their lives. People experiencing stalking may make big and small changes in their lives to avoid the stalker. For example, they may withdraw from social activities. They might change their routines. They might avoid being alone. They might change their phone number or social media accounts, or even relocate. There may also be differences in someone's health. They might change their eating or sleeping habits or increase alcohol or drug use. Stalking is directed at a specific person, not a random person. Stalkers may target other people close to the primary victim, like family members or a new boyfriend or girlfriend. A stalker may use people close to the victim to get to the victim. Some stalkers target multiple victims, like a couple or members of a sorority or fraternity. So stalking is a pattern of behavior that requires two or more behaviors. The behaviors can vary or be the same. Some behaviors are criminal on their own, like property damage, while others only become criminal when they're a part of a stalking case, like excessive texting. Like domestic violence, stalking is not just one incident, it's a pattern. Asking ourselves, does the behavior have to be the same every time? For example, calling every day, or can the behaviors be different? Behaviors can be different, like calling one day and then sending a gift the next day, etc. When you're looking at your state's stalking statute, realize that most legal definitions of stalking use the same term, course of conduct. This is a synonym for pattern of behavior. Okay, so part 2 is name it. Now that we know it, we'll move on to the second section, name it. Stalking can include a wide variety of behaviors. Stalkers often engage in surveillance, life invasion, interference, and intimidation. These behaviors can happen through technology, in person, or both. These categories overlap and can build on each other. Most stalking behaviors fall under one of these categories. So the first one is surveillance, which includes watching, tracking, and or gathering information about a person. The second one, life invasion, means showing up at in the person's life where they don't want them to be. The third one is interference, including sabotaging, attacking, humiliating, or otherwise changing the person's life for the worse. And then the last one, intimidation, means the ways a stalker threatens and or scares a victim. And so I can think of actual situations that fall within these categories. I know that I've talked to a person who who their ex-husband would show up at their workplace and make a scene, or would catch them when they're alone at their workplace. And so can you think of other examples, not using any names? So these are some examples. Following or checking in on, watching and waiting at places where the victim might be. I remember having getting a call from a certain person, and they who had a protective order, and they said, I'm on the bus and this person is standing in the parking lot staring at me. And I confess that my first thought was, well, it's a free, it's a free place. They're allowed to be there. But after learning more about stalking, I always go back to that situation where that really could have been stalking. And I could hear in the person's voice the fear. And I thought to myself, well, you're on the bus, that person is out there in the parking lot. But the point was that that person is appearing everywhere in that person's life. Planting or accessing a camera, keeping track of a person online on social media. We've heard of that a lot. Hacking into their account, asking friends, family, or colleagues about the person, getting information. And we have to be really careful about that, because sometimes we don't think it's a big deal to talk to somebody about how their friend is doing or what their friends are doing. But we really do have to be aware of stalking. So calling the person's phone and hanging up, that can be alarming, because the person being stalked usually knows who that is. Joining groups specifically because that person knows that the victim's going to be there. Leaving gifts, leaving packages. We think that's harmless, but it could be stalking. Spreading rumors and misinformation. These are examples of interference through sabotage or attacks, damaging property, custody interference, causing trauma and or physical injury, intimidation, verbal, written, or online, sending third parties to watch or intimidate. So these are all examples. So it says here that more than 1 in 6 women experience stalking in their lifetimes, and 1 in 17 men in their lifetimes. Women are more likely than men to experience stalking. The majority of victims report that the offender is male, regardless of the victim's sexual orientation. And most victims do not report to law enforcement. Stalking often goes unnamed and unreported. Many stalking victims don't report what they're experienced to law enforcement because of minimization. People don't think it's a big deal, not recognizing it as stalking, and shame that they may be embarrassed and or think that what's occurring is a private matter. And distrust of police. They don't believe that law enforcement will respond. So this is a screenshot of an image result for the term stalking. What do you notice about these pictures? The popular image of a stalker is often a hooded, faceless male stranger. TV shows popularize the secret admirer stalker. While this can happen, it is rare. In the vast majority of stalking cases, the victim knows the perpetrator. When many people think about stalking, they think about celebrities being stalked by obsessed fans. In reality, the majority of stalkers are intimate partners, current or former. Stalking is a method of exerting power and control in an abusive relationship. It's also essential to realize that many stalkers are not intimate partners. Particularly for male victims, the stalker is often an acquaintance. Stalking is often categorized under domestic violence, but it's essential to realize that not all stalking is related to domestic violence. All stalking victims need our help and our response. All stalkers can be dangerous. On average, intimate partner stalkers are the most likely to threaten and harm their victims. Why do you think this is? Why might an intimate partner make for a particularly dangerous stalker? Maybe because they know the victim the best, they know the victim's schedule, social networks, even accounts and passwords. They know the victim well and how best to upset them. They have the most access to the victim. Okay, so this is Peggy Klinke. We're gonna watch her video and have a little discussion or sharing comments. Okay.
It all began in the fall of '98. At the age of 28, my sister Peggy began preparing for medical school in Albuquerque, New Mexico. She met and began dating a man named Patrick Kennedy. You know, in the beginning, it seemed like a very fine relationship to me. They were dating, doing dating things, going to movies, but I noticed a switch in Peggy's personality. I just knew something wasn't right with my sister, and I wasn't sure why. Peggy and Patrick's relationship lasted about 3 years altogether. In March of 2002, Peggy cut all ties with him. From the day she left him, he began stalking her. Calling her on her cell phone, begging her to come back, threatening her. He waited outside of her work. He waited outside of her gym, just watching her till it was a sort of a sign to let you know that I'm there and I'm watching her every move.
He wanted her back in his life, and until he did, you know, he was just gonna persist with it.
At one point, Peggy had called me in the afternoon and said, "You'll never believe this. Patrick jumped out of the bushes at work with a dozen roses and a wedding ring and asked me to marry him." And Peggy said, "I walked right by him, I got in my car and drove away." Peggy was very, very strong and very determined to shake this man from her life. And the more she ignored him, the angrier he got. Then he progressed to paperwork. He made a really nice 8.5 by 11 flyer with a photo of my sister on it, wrote all sorts of incredible obscenities about her and put her cell phone number on it and distributed it where she had her nails done, where she had her hair cut, where her gym was, where she worked.
She took the flyer to the police and showed them that, but there was nothing they can do. It was only a flyer.
But I think at that point, you know, we were still thinking that he was just playing a game. We didn't think it would escalate. And then he took greater steps because she wasn't reacting. That June, our family gathered in Orlando, Florida for my brother's wedding. Peggy brought a new man she had begun dating, Mark Sparks. Patrick knew that we would all be in Florida for this wedding. And he had flown to my mother's house in Poland, Ohio, and on her white garage doors with black spray paint, he sprayed "PK is a whore" on the doors. Patrick then returned to Albuquerque to set fire to Mark's house.
I noticed I had about 8 messages on my cell phone, and I knew something was wrong. So I listened to the messages. My neighbor, my mother, the police, the fire department were all calling and saying that my house was on fire. Right away, Peggy knew that Patrick had done this.
Peggy and Mark were going from hotel to hotel because they had nowhere to live because Mark's house was set on fire. We were at the point we didn't want Peggy to call us because we didn't know if he was trying to trace a phone call. We didn't want him to find out Peggy's whereabouts. Peggy, it seemed for a while, was just in hiding.
Everything that Patrick did to Peggy, Peggy went and reported it to the police. She was getting very, very, very agitated with them because nothing was being done to stop this man from harassing her. Patrick's behavior was escalating and Peggy got a restraining order. She went to the police and filed for stalking charges. The trial was delayed for several months. Nothing was being done.
It was extremely frustrating, and in a time where you're being hunted by somebody and you feel more victimized by going through the system to protect yourself, then what good is it?
And I remember Peggy coming home having a binder of probably 200-300 pages in it of just everything she had documented. Peggy did all the footwork. Peggy did everything. She did everything right, but nobody would help her. Why? I don't know the answer to that.
And at this point, Peggy asked the DA, "Will it take a bullet to my head for you to do something about this?"
With Patrick's behavior escalating, we just felt like, at least temporarily, let's get you out of here. Let's wait for this stalking trial to come up. And by that time, we can determine whether it's safe for you to move back home.
Peggy soon left for Turlock, California to begin a new life. She did everything she could to leave no trace or trail to protect herself. 6 days before her stalking trial was to happen, Patrick found Peggy after months of searching.
So how did this happen? After paying a private investigator for information, Peggy's stalker drove to the Albuquerque airport, checked a handgun and a hunting rifle at the airline counter, and flew to San Jose, California. He retrieved his bag with his weapons, rented a car, and arrived at her neighborhood. He posed as a private investigator, approached a delivery driver who recognized her photo, and gave him her exact address.
He caught up with her on her way out of the house early Saturday morning. He duct taped her hands together, he choked her, and he beat her. He beat her so severely with his gun that her blonde hair turned bright red. Despite all of this, Peggy managed to break free and flee to a neighbor's apartment where she was able to call 911.
911 emergency. I have a stalker. He's here to kill me. He's already beat me up and taped me. He's in my house. 1410, number 118 is where he said. Who's there? Patrick Kennedy. He's beating me up with a gun. He's trying to break it down. Does he have a gun right now? Yes, he already beat my head. If you don't get her, he's going to kill both of us. Okay, we're on the way, ma'am. Now. Are they on the way? They're on their way. Quickly, my head is stopping wet with blood. He is in this house. He's going to kill us. Stay on the line with me, ma'am. I'm staying on the line. Oh my God. How close are they? They're on their way. Patrick, I'm the only one here. Hey, Rand, please. Stop it. Female. Please stop it. I think I see him kill me. Ma'am?
The SWAT team arrived. Peggy told them, "If you open this door, he will kill me."
And the police officer said, let's not talk about that, Peggy. Let's talk about your family. And Peggy had said, tell my mother that I love her. And tell my sister who's pregnant to name the baby after me. And tell my niece, Abby, she will have a guardian angel. And those were Peggy's 3 last requests before she was killed.
I just remember punching a hole in one of my walls, and I just, I started crying, and I just said, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry to Peggy, because, at that point you just feel that I failed her, that the whole system failed her. You just feel powerless.
So let's just take a second and breathe. And so I just want to share a breathing tool that I like to use when I feel anxious and as part of wellness. And so it's just making a box, a square box with 4 sides. One side you breathe in through your mouth for the count of 4. Hold your breath for 4 counts and breathe out for 4 counts. Rest for 4 counts. I'm sorry, breathe in through your nose. Hold, breathe out through your mouth, and rest. And do that a couple times. So that's a deep breathing exercise. That's one of my wellness tools that I use that I wanted to share. So that was pretty scary. That's a true story and a pretty scary scenario. And so Patrick used a wide variety of stalking tactics to scare Peggy. The stalking case consumed her entire life and affected her friends and family. Stalking should not have to rise to the level of violence or murder before we take it seriously. We need to be able to identify stalking behaviors early on and step in to stop it. One thing that I do at Legal Aid when I'm doing preparing protective orders for victims is I highlight the word stalking. When there's stalking involved, I like to highlight the word stalking so that the judge knows that there is stalking involved in this case. If we say that he's always showing up at the store, that doesn't really, catch stalking until we name it and say the word stalking. He's been stalking her and showing up at different places and explaining the stalking. So these are some discussion questions that I don't think we have time for. So we're just going to go straight into the last part, which is stop it. So you have the power to support victims and hold perpetrators accountable. We all have a role to play in building awareness about stalking, addressing stalking, and supporting victims and survivors. The casual use of the word stalking can make this crime seem less serious than it really is. The word stalking is often used casually and incorrectly. You might have heard people say something like, "Oh, I was stalking you on Facebook," or "I was stalking you online," or "I was looking at a friend's photo on social media." Is not scary. It's not stalking. Hearing stalking used incorrectly so often can negatively impact our sense of urgency around the crime. It can lead both victims and responders to minimize the experience and think that stalking is not so bad. Do not minimize stalking. So this is the last video. It's a 2-minute video. And the message is that most victims of stalking talk to their friends or family about the situation before pursuing any sort of professional or legal help. If a stalking victim talks to you, your response makes a huge difference in if they feel validated and or seek help.
Most victims of stalking talk to a friend, family member, or someone else they know and trust first before deciding to seek additional help. That person's response can make a huge difference. If the victim's fears are validated and taken seriously, they're more likely to tell others, as well as to seek additional help from law enforcement, victim service providers, or other community resources. If someone tells you that they're experiencing stalking, believe them. Many victims blame themselves, so remind them that the stalking is not their fault. Nothing that the victim did or did not do justifies the stalker's behavior. If you see or hear from the stalker, do not share any information about the victim, no matter what the stalker says. Don't just have one conversation, check in with your friend using the communication medium that they prefer. Encourage the victim to make a safety plan and to seek local services to help them do so. If you aren't sure where to start, Victim Connect can help make a referral to local resources. Stalking victims can also complete an assessment at coercivecontrol.org to learn more about the risks in their stalking case. And the Stalking Prevention Awareness and Resource Center has some general information about stalking at stalkingawareness.org. Remember, victims are the experts on their own lives and safety. Friends like you can provide the information, options, and support to help them make the right decisions for themselves. Together, we can know it, name it, and stop it.
And so it's important to document, to encourage stalking victims to document and to have a stalking log. There are some attached documents for you to download if you're interested. And one of them is this form, which is a stalking log. And it also shows a pattern of stalking. So I think there are like 7 forms that you can download that I provided Judy with. So also spread the word. Spark has a website that you can go online and you can request brochures and things like this. There's one form on the website that I really enjoy, and what it is you do an intake with a person and you just type in all the answers to all the questions, and then when you hit at the end, when you hit send, it'll format everything, all the information that you took into a report. And that report can be given to the police, given to the, kept in their file, given to the judge of the stalking incidences. So yeah, that can be found on the website as well. So what will you do to address stalking? And so I know that one point that I made was to emphasize and to address stalking and to call it what it is, stalking. Bringing stalking to the forefront, more awareness and education, Many people might not realize the seriousness of stalking. The importance of victim advocates. Victim advocates are specialized in domestic violence and is able to guide the person through. One thing I know about advocates for victims is that alone, they're more likely to withdraw and not follow through with the case. But when they have an advocate, they're more likely to, do what they need to do when they have that support, whether it's to leave the person, the abuser, or to go to a safe place, etc., or to file for a protective order. Acknowledge and highlight the word stalking in cases, especially with court orders. Stalking is a Title IX violation when it is based on sex or gender. Stalking is an activity which must not be tolerated and should be reported. And push for stalking and harassment protective orders. So in American Samoa, we do have civil protective orders, but often the judge is looking for if there's any violence, current recent violence involved. And it can be hard to prove stalking. So there are in many states stalking / harassment protective orders. So that might be something that American Samoa might be interested in. I know that I've had many people, especially elderly, who came and requested a protective order, but it didn't fall under a civil protective order where there was physical violence. So a stalking harassment protective order would be perfect for that. So here are some resources for help locally. EPIC, Catholic Social Services, DHSS, the Alliance, the Coalition, and American Samoa has a 988 crisis line, which is not just a crisis line, but also a talk line. And if anyone else knows any resources, please, and you want to share, please share it in the chat and Judy will share it out. So this is the website that you can also go on, stalkingawareness.org, where you can get fact sheets, awareness resources, etc. So thank you. I'd just like to turn it over to Judy. Judy, are there any comments or questions, or anyone have any resources they wanted to share?
So Jaylene was saying, great to know that there's a code annotated on stalking here in American Samoa. And so we have, going back to what I was saying earlier, we have joining us is Tapu Manea Malusa Tele, and he had, okay, so we have here joining us also today is Tapu Manea Malusa Tele, and I'd like to share his comment. Larry Santoa and myself submitted the stalking law and got it passed. It was during a time that Tafuna high school girls were being followed, were lured by taxi and bus drivers for a ride and sexually abused. And it was, he also mentioned that it was funny that there were reps against it and were concerned for false reporting, but we were able to provide cases of girls who were victims of stalking, and they were traumatized to the point of not wanting to attend school. So I'm honored that we have here joining us is Tapu Manea, who understands what today's presentation is about, because he was part of introducing that law. Introducing that bill into law. So thank you, Tapu Manea, for having that vision, for you and Senator, Rep. Larry Sanitoa for having done that. I know, huh?
It is something taken lightly that we need to emphasize more. And I've even had college age girls that were being stalked by people. And so I'm glad that we do have a law on stalking.
Wendy here added, grateful to you, Satele and Sanitoa, for having the stalking law submitted and passed. We need to bring more awareness to this law due to seeing a lot of this happening here locally, just like what Mona was saying earlier. Tapumanaya is sharing, yes, we still have many victims who are not reporting their experience and are afraid or embarrassed to say anything. They need to be assured the law will help and can prevent them from getting hurt. Yes. That's why it's important for more awareness and advocacy so they know there is a law and they can understand they are real victims. And he too is saying, thank you for this topic and for the informative presentation. Malola Mona. Thank you, Mona, for your presentation. From Wendy. Thank you, Mona, from Ula. Thank you, Mona, from Jaylene. Thank you for joining us, Jaylene. All right, we have someone here asking, is there a Samoan word for stalking? An example of a local stalking case? We've had victims come in and tell how the abuser comes to the home unannounced. One story each time we would call the cops. She had a CPO on 4 different times. He came over. The last time was with a knife and he broke into her home. Would that escalation be considered stalking? I want to put it out there that if anyone has a Samoan term they think would apply to stalking, let me just please put it in the chat box if you do. Let me just say this: we've had a couple of people say that stalking is in Samoan it would be the word moikolo. Say too low, excuse me. They would use the word moitolo or moikolo, but that moikolo verbatimly would be night prowler, someone who, but then it also happens during the day, gone are the days when it was just when people were sleeping at night, like a night prowler. People are also going into other people's homes during the day, when they see victims that are consistently at home, or or women that are at home. So it does happen sometimes during the day. So I think night prowler or moikolo can be one of the words to apply to stalking. But for me, I wouldn't, if somebody were to say, what is Samoan for stalking? I wouldn't instantly think of moikolo. Some people have also used the word someone who, like Mona was saying earlier, someone who follows you around. Like follows you around, but is more so in a discreet manner, right, Mona? Like someone who's following you around that you don't know of. Like you turn around, you could feel someone's following you. You turn around, they're not there. In the Samoan term for that would be politamulmuli, someone who follows you around. Tamulmuli. Let me see. We have some. We have, okay. Yes, we have Nalu here. Tapumane is saying there is a Samoan version of the law. I do know when it was discussed, there wasn't a clear one word for examples whereof such like tamulimuli le fatangaina. So you're following someone around without their consent or without any, permission to follow me around, or, yeah. So I would think the word tamulimuli, but rather than just like what Tafmanaya is saying here, rather than just one term, you have to go into explaining what Tamulmuli is. And so he's saying there's a Samoan version of the law. This is something we can look up. Thank you, Tapu. Thank you for that information.
Thank you. Yes.
So please, and if anyone has any translation they can think of, please include it in the chat box. So yeah, you have a lot of thank yous here, Mona, for this great presentation.
Thank you, everyone.
This was some awesome information. Thank you for this. Thank you, everyone, and thank you so much, Mona. Thank you, Asla, Director Scott Hess, for making this information available and for bringing this information to the forefront. And we hope that this information supports you with your work in your advocacy and for the victims of violence here in the territory. For more information on stalking, please do not hesitate to connect with us here at the Alliance, 699-0272. Or if you have my email, go ahead and send me an email. Or you can connect with Mona if you have Mona's information directly. But any information that comes my way, I will forward it to Mona about today's webinar. Thank you so much.